The competitive 40K network presents Art of War.
Art of War.
Strategy and tactics. Discussions with the best players on the planet. Now your host, Nick Nanavati.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting Art of War 40K podcast episode. Today, we're talking to two of my good friends from the frozen north of Canada. We've got the team leaders of Tyrants of the Mid-Table, another team that went undefeated at Hammertime Team's March of Iron team tournament. We previously had Craig and Kevin on from Exploding Sixes just a couple weeks ago talking about their undefeated run, but this tournament actually had two teams we're talking about on their undefeated path here. So here we've got Kasra Houshidar, member of the Canadian World Team Championship team and Art of War. And we've got Stu Angel here, also a member of the Canadian World Team Championship team. How are you guys doing?
Great, thanks. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. And you, Stu?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you for having me on. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for coming on. I know, Cass, this is not your first time. We love having you. Stu, this is your first time. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited.
Super exciting. I've listened to the show for a while and excited to get into it.
Dude, I love that. Today's episode, listeners, is going to be a little bit different than usual. You can already tell we've got two guests instead of one, but we're going to be focusing a lot more on their journey as a team. I've known Cass since his very first team event as a little baby, and now he's out here captaining teams to new and great heights. And Stu is right alongside him as a member of not only this very successful team, but also the Canadian World Team Championship national team. So we've got a lot of veteran team experience here, and I think on this episode, we're going to do part one, getting to know them, their team composition, how they manage a team, what the different roles and all that stuff was. And then in part two of our conversation, that's going to be for our patrons. We love you all. That is where we're going to talk about the round by round challenges that a team faces in real time. You know, you're going to get the broad macro scale picture. This person's going down. This pairing's really rough. We had no answer for this in their team comp. And we're going to figure out on a team level how you navigate around that. So Team Warhammer is my personal favorite way of playing Warhammer, which means it's awesome. And you should also learn about teams because it's awesome. So if you want to learn more about teams, you can subscribe on patreon.com/AOW40K. It is $5 a month. It gets you access to this podcast and 285 other episodes worth of Warhammer goodness, and our amazing Discord where you can talk to these lovely gentlemen directly. It actually doesn't get better, folks. So go ahead, subscribe. It really helps us keep the show going, and we love producing it for you. All right, that's my spiel. We're done spieling and dealing, guys. Let's get into it. Cass, I'm going to start with you. Tell me about how you got involved with this team and what your kind of role was with it.
Sure. So this team is kind of actually part of a larger team, the Mid-Table Tactics team. So Stu and I are actually both orphans, not part of that team in the sort of like typical singles play way. My team is primarily Art of War, and Stu has his own team as well that he's part of. So locally, for local team events, we were kind of just sort of sitting out in the cold, and our good friends from Mid-Table Tactics invited us to join one of the two teams that they were going to be sending. And as a result of that, we ended up kind of chatting through with the guys. We are now, more officially part of that team and have voting rights as well. But going into this event, we were kind of assigned as part of the Tyrants team versus the Knights team. And they were trying to do a bit of a load balancing of experienced teams players on each team with some of the less competitive, more casual players from their broader team as well. So we were lucky enough to have enough folks that were willing to commit the time and really give teams a shot for some of them for the first time. And it was really exciting. It breathes a different kind of life into the whole process from start to finish when you have folks that have never done teams before. For me, it was a big shift because, when I've gone to team events with Art of War, I'm typically a blunter. So I am thrown into whatever matchup, whatever table, and I'm told, bring back a 10 if you can. Well, coming into this team, being one of the more experienced folks on the team, my job was a little bit different, and I had to bring in some points. So it was a pretty cool dynamic shift for me.
That's awesome. I can imagine, especially, on Art of War, I've always known you as like one of the newer players, and you've become quite a veteran on the team by this point. But, taking you from your first team event where you're like, I've never played teams before, what is this? To now you're captaining and coaching other teams is, that brings a tear to my heart. And Stu, what about you? You're on the World Team Championship team as well. And, I really don't know. You haven't been on the show. I don't know much about you yet. Tell me a bit about yourself competitively and how you got involved with teams and what your relationship with Team Warhammer is like.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting road for me, just in 40K in general. I started playing kind of just a year and a half ago, just under 2 years ago. I was in the UK studying law, and just as a way of kind of connecting with my older brother, who has always been into 40K, I just picked up a hobby and entered a tournament on a whim. Ended up doing pretty well, and then kind of it is just spiraled and spirals from there in a good way. And it's kind of led to this thing and the other. And I was going to super majors in the UK, and then I met a team of great guys. It's called Polaris that I'm on a team on. They're all based out of West Yorkshire, Leeds, UK. And I just was playing singles primarily, going to tournaments with them, having a great time. And then I came back to North America last August and immediately went to Tacoma, got lucky and got a top 10 there, met all the MTT guys. And then, because they kind of run our area, really, in Vancouver, they're big. They run events here. The team's quite large. They're excellent, great guys. So getting in with them and being social with them and creating those relationships was amazing. And then that led to this opportunity to play on this team. I was always interested in teams. I can't obviously play with my team because they're on the other side of the water, but this was a huge opportunity that MTT gave us. So it was something that I always wanted to do. I've heard yourself talk about this on your podcast and other Art of War guys saying how teams is this incredible medium and has a strong argument for being like the best medium to play 40K. So I was like, I gotta try this. So this event was a great opportunity to do that. And luckily Kaz and I got kind of responsibilities within the team too, which was fun. We really got to immerse ourselves, and that's kind of been it for me. Just a lot of fun.
Wow, that is awesome to hear. So what role did you kind of find yourself playing on in this team?
This team specifically, we kind of, like Kaz was saying, we were a bit orphans. Like we kind of went into this like put us where you want us kind of thing. And then as the team kind of developed and we got closer to these guys, like we kind of were like, okay, we have a lot of things to offer here. We can help with pairings or whatever role you need us kind of thing. And I came in, I think team role. I was supposed to be a defender, kind of blunter on final day, because it's just such a stable army,
right?
Score secondaries at will. And then I think one of our players who were world leaders, he wanted to switch to NIDS. Once he switched to NIDS, that meant I couldn't play final day anymore. So then I went to host, and host is just like stable, upside, can attack really well. And so I just brought 148 models.
Oh my god, that's awesome. Yeah, we'll cover your lists and kind of how they played a little bit later in this episode. But I want to talk a little bit more about like coming into a team, especially a team where you're not very familiar with the rest of the players and the experience levels all over the place. Cass, why don't you tell me about how you found yourself like as I guess a leader of this team, and like dealing with the different experience levels and managing the team comp, all that preparation leading up to it. How did you navigate that?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I want to be clear, like our captain was Jordan Gallagher, and he is part of the mid-table team. And, he was very candid, good communicator with myself and asked for my help, said, hey, you've done this a lot before. I'm going to lean on you a fair bit here. And then as part of the broader mid-table sort of prep that we did, I was involved with the team leadership on just kind of running some scrims and getting an idea of what factions people were comfortable running. Once the decisions were made about who was on which team, we got our roster and it was Jordan. And again, we decided, his primary faction is NIDS. And knowing what he could do with Vanguard NIDS as a good first defender into most lists was pretty critical. So between him and myself, we had a solid defender for both defender rounds. Beyond that, what I was kind of looking at was, okay, in terms of player experience on the roster, I'm a longtime local player in my local scene, even if I'm not on their team. So I kind of looked at, who do we have? Well, I know Stu's a great up and coming player. He's doing really well. So I felt confident there. We had Brendan on Sisters. He is a single faction player, better known as McTwerp on any and every Discord that Warhammer has spoken of. He is quite a good Sisters player. So we had a unique faction that you're not seeing so much these days, which I don't have to tell you for teams is quite an asset to have something where people don't fully understand how it wins games and how it works. And then Jordan, again, another up and coming player. He's, I think, been playing for the last 2 years or so, but he is phenomenal on his Tyranids. And we had our one player who was less of a competitive player, but I've known this gentleman for a long time. Pat was on. He was considering different armies, and what we looked at was we have a bit of an open question for Eldar and certain things like that. And one of the armies that was an option for Pat was Chaos Knights. And we figured that, with a little bit of love in the pairings, even though Pat hadn't been able to get as many reps in or practice in the same kind of way that us WTC players are practicing, like, specific matchups on specific tables, we were confident that we could give Pat games where he was either going to hold the line and get the 7 that we needed or the 5 points that we needed, or in some cases actually, blow out an opponent and get us some real points. So that was kind of how we approached the overall 5-man roster once we had the players based out. It was kind of easy. We had one mono faction. We had Stu, who was playing very well with his host of Ascension, among other lists. He was playing with GSC, scoring big numbers. And I myself, on my trusty Ultramarines, I have been having a great time with the Stormlance Ultramarines variation that John has put together. And so it kind of fell together.
Wow, very nice. So, sorry, I might have missed it. What was Pat playing?
Pat ended up playing Chaos Knights.
Chaos Knights, yeah, it's a solid army for that wild card spot. And then Stu, what about your experience on the team? I know you played Host of Ascension. You were one of those like more up and coming experienced players here. How did you find navigating the factions? Giving Jordan Tyranids not playing your final day that you're practicing, and then also the different roles in the team. Did you feel like everyone had a clear job and they knew what they were aiming for? And like, how does that play into your playing on the team practically?
Totally. Yeah. We were lucky that MTD is super organized. We were able to get a few scrim days in, which was great. It was super helpful, just against some kind of local teams here, even an internal scrim as well. And I think if we hadn't had those, it would have been a bit harder to kind of identify really what role everyone could fit into. And I mean, fives is a different beast than eights. Obviously, fives is a lot more streamlined. It's a lot smaller. You kind of have overlap. I feel like in your roles, like you can, like every round we went into, we had our defender in Kaz, but things could be variable. Depending on what armies we were going up against. If we thought we could get a better pairing here or a different board choice here. I felt like we were really locked in. Having someone like Warp, which Kaz mentioned, on a mono faction sister specialist was so helpful because we don't get into it now, but like I love his list. I love his list. I love how he plays it. And as Kaz was saying, it was so advantageous. Like Brendan was just super solid, knew his role. He could bring back yellows or 10s all day and had tons of upside. And I think we had that for the most part across the board, which was really, really cool to have. Like everyone felt really solid. Everyone felt like if we needed them to just go under the bus, they would still scrape something out. And always felt like we had a potential to push for more, which is really fun. In terms of constructing the team, it wasn't too difficult, I felt. We all had like certainly preferred factions. There was a little bit of juggling, kind of like what we mentioned, final day, host, using NIDs, using world eaters, but all these roles kind of fulfilled a little bit the same thing. But I found it super interesting. It was compared to singles where you're just trying to tailor a list basically to just attack the open board, essentially, and just try and give yourself a chance to do as much things as possible. Having to really get to choose the tools individually was really, really fun. and skewing one way, having pairing duos to try and pin people, all these great things. I thoroughly enjoyed the preliminary process of kind of assembling the team and choosing the roles and choosing the detachments.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think that there's a whole game between the game, with pairings and team composition, all that, and you can set yourself up for success or failure without even realizing it. Whereas in the singles, once you're there, you play the list you have, and that's kind of the end of it. There's so much more, even once you're there, how do we manipulate the pairings to get us the best odds to it? And then how did you guys manage pairings on that note? Cass, I'll ask that one to you.
So we had a big matrix for literally every team in the event. So Jordan put that together, and we each went through and kind of filled out our either vibes or rep based sort of matrix. But more importantly, I think outside of Pat, we were all staying at the same cabin for this event. Like, we were all kind of together before the event. So the evening before, we literally just went through mock pairings and paired every potential scenario into the team we knew we were going to be facing the next morning. So we had some pretty good ideas when we did have that advanced knowledge of who we wanted and who we didn't. But by doing that as a team, we built that muscle. So, like, I don't think it's even fair to say I did pairings or Stu did pairings or Jordan did pairings or Brendan did pairings. Like, we all kind of did pairings together as a team because we were all part of that process. And what ended up kind of coming from that was when we did have to kind of look at a team, look at our matrix. We've got an hour for lunch, but we're eating pizza while we're kind of talking through the different pairings because we've done this a few times now and we've built that muscle. I feel like that was one of our biggest competitive edges that we had on other teams. There was some teams that going in, I know these players, or I know these players have traveled from a different meta and I know they're good. So we're looking out for them. But I think in some of those rounds, when we get to that, we'll talk about it. But it's probably what won us a lot of those rounds was that edge that we had, knowing what pairings we really wanted to avoid and knowing what pairings were like really blue for us. So I think just going through and doing the work, because it's easy to get a little lazy and just say, we'll figure it out as we go. But when you've kind of drilled through every possible scenario, you have a bit of an advantage, and we really press that, I think.
But what does that even look like? And I mean, how do you not technically construct a matrix? Just for those of you who are listening and are not really sure what we're talking about, it's basically a matchup grid where you have your armies on one side, every theoretical opposing army on another side, and you just like write a score down, like what you expect to win by, like, win by 5, lose by 3, close game, big loss, big win, that type of stuff. How do you, and I'll ask you this too, since you also participated in this process and really had to figure it out with a new list, how did you practically give an accurate assessment of all the different matchups you could come up with dealing with the physical limitations of life? You don't have a great every army in the world player at your fingertips, and there's time and like real life constraints prevent you from just playing infinite 40k. How do you then put an accurate number into your matrix and you'd lean on that knowledge?
It's a great question. I think there's probably 4 layers to it. I think obviously the first layer is first-hand experience. This is made a bit more difficult by the the release of the Grotmus detachments, which just like exploded so many more detachments into the game. It's hard to have gotten real good competitive first-hand reps against all of them, and that's kind of the beauty of teams, is that there's value in everything. Like, there's value, it seems like, in everything in teams, which is another reason to love it, because you can play against armies and detachments that you've never got to before in a singles tournament, because singles a lot of the time are dominated by the hotness. So the first stage definitely is just first-hand experience. That's obviously going to be the most accurate score you can really give. Other than that, I'd say at the second level, you probably have something closer to stuff that you've played that's similar. Maybe it's changed a bit. Maybe there's a bit of nerf here or there, but kind of light second-hand experience, or kind of light first-hand experience. And then third, you have to rely on people you know, right? You have to talk to people you know. You talk to your teammates. Maybe they've played it. This person's played it. There was a lot of help within our team. I know that. I know Team Canada, like when we get into our pairings, we're always talking to each other, always meeting with each other, trying to figure out why this person brought this, and do I have a game into this, and how would you feel if I was running this? And then, as Kaz mentioned, probably on the 4th level, it's just vibes, man. You got to just get a feel for it. Look at the loadouts, look at the stats, look at the day sheets, the army rule, and just try and get a feel for it. And if you just throw out a guess, then you can put that in your matrix and say unsure. You put a question mark and hope for the best in that point.
Cass, what's your take on the healthy scrutiny of our matrixing? Someone's going to have an opinion on their matchup, and you may disagree with it, or multiple members of your team may disagree with it. They might have experience, but maybe their opponent is of questionable skill. How did you navigate matchups where people disagreed, or even matchups that people just didn't know, and there was just like no real knowledge well to dive from?
Well, I think a big part of it was being open to pretty direct communication. Like if I thought someone was overestimating their score into a certain matchup, I had no problem telling them. And, asking the right questions, like, does table pick matter? Are you assuming that you're going to get table picked because you're not a defender, so you're not going to have that? Things like that, just kind of poking and prodding at the thought process around explain to me what makes this game, a blue matchup for you where you're going to score 16 points. Break that down for me. So in having those conversations with no ego around it by either party, the person saying this is the score I can bring, or the people kind of challenging that, you're opening up that discussion. You're getting to actually get into the nuts and bolts of it. Sometimes, that was a little bit too, rosy-eyed of a estimate. Sometimes, us non-players of that faction didn't see a certain combination, that maybe combination of something in the list, some tech that they had, or something on that mission that made that matchup good. So it was a lot of being open to discussion, but really the guidance that I gave everybody, and this is something, being on the Art of War team has really taught me. And one thing that, I know that I've been proud that I've been able to deliver when you've been doing my pairings for me is I am very conservative with the number that I will put down. I do not put down a 10 if I think it's it could slip to a 7 or a 6 even, right? If I'm saying I'm going to bring home a 16, that is my floor. So I was advising everyone on the team, like, I don't want your pie in the sky. I want, things go bad, dice are cold, you don't get the turn you want, you don't get the table you want. What does this pairing look like? And by doing that, I think you get to the heart of, like, what are the real reds and what are the real greens? And that gives the person actually doing the pairings the ability to engineer situations where, and with 5-mans, it's different. You don't get everything you want, but you kind of get to see, well, what's the thing we want the most or the least? And you play around that. And so really building out the floor score projection was a big part of it, and a big piece of guidance that I gave to the rest of the team.
Stu, how did you find applying that kind of mantra to the pairing cycle? Were you able to give your floor as the score input and then overperform it? Was that difficult? What was your opinion on that?
No, I felt like Kaz explained it terrifically there. I think that's it was really, really important. I think I've seen other teams kind of being part of scrims and stuff like that, that sometimes you'll look at a team's matrix and it'll just be way too green, which is a weird thing to say because you obviously want your matrix to be green. But I do think that the Kaz is right. I think people can get a little overestimate a little bit, and because of that, you get these greens, and it makes pairings harder in a way. Like, you can have greens all over the place, but there's a real difference between green with upside, green with downside, green if things go great, or, like Kaz was saying, green is an absolute baseline. And these things need to be communicated, and chances are, like if you have greens across the board, there's probably some greens that are better for you than others, and you should reflect that in your matrix. It makes pairing easier because you're going to go into one of them, and you should have been somewhere else. So I think it's really important. I think we were really good. We were really on each other with that, which is really important because, like you said, there's a lot of new tactics floating around. We had players necessarily weren't getting a ton of competitive reps in, so they had to rely on our opinion for these kinds of things. And it definitely made pairings easier. And I feel like we were able to identify the pairings that we really wanted because of that.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. All right. So we've talked a lot about the pre-preparation and all that stuff. Let's talk a little bit about the lists and what their designated roles were and like what they were trying to do. Cass, we'll start with yours. Just break it down like top to bottom, what your list you took to the event. And I know you said you were like a second defender type of person. What was the idea behind your list creation for that role?
Sure. So the list itself is a Stormlance Ultramarines list that plays like a pseudo Gladius, except the big difference is it has a Storm Raven, and so it, in a sense, brings a little bit of a bit of a skew list to the table. But really, the thing about this list that I love is that it scores really well. It can handle different types of units, so it can kill armor, it can kill hordes. So really my original inclination of when I was designing this list for the team was as a defender list. So I didn't really have many, if any, red matchups. And in practice, like I was taking the matchups I thought were worse for me. Like I'll use Imperial Knights as an example. Like my list does have the ability to kill some armor, but can it handle a complete skew of oops all baby knights or even like a couple big knights? So I got practice reps in playing my worst case scenarios to make sure that the lower end of what I was going to score on any matchup would be around an 8. But that being said, in kind of preparing for this, I realized there were certain matchups that my list, because of the speed that it has, is actually quite good at. Generally combined arms, and I'm not talking about the detachment specifically, but combined arms guard lists that bring a balance of armor and infantry, I am very good into. Eldari lists, I'm good into. So there's certain lists that I felt quite confident I could push the score, but knowing that I didn't really have any bad matchups that were completely going to get blown out made me a good defender.
Yeah.
I would say I ended up second defending often, but the key difference for me was because I had the plane, I didn't need table pick, I needed table veto. And that was an interesting nuance to kind of work around.
That's a great way to put it. I like that nuance because table pick doesn't need to be used for an extremity like table 7 in Games Workshop layout, for example. Where you're trying to find the one specific board where your army is insane on. It can also be used to just ensure you don't get screwed. There's 1 or 2 boards you can't play on, so let me just not hit those for sure. And I think Space Marines are definitely an army where they are great take-all-comers. They're like the quintessential take-all-comers. And then you've skewed your army a little bit with the Storm Raven. Now you're a little bit more aggressive capable with that speed boost, but it does have the caveat of like playing around terrain. So you've got, choice on that in a good way. And in a 5-person team setting, the role of defender, especially second defender, can still really be an offensive role, counterintuitive to its name, because there's so few armies left. There's still very few options. They might even have to just attack something into you because they don't have a choice, and then you get to gobble something up on your board choice. Stu, what about you? What was your list kind of read off top to bottom, and like how did you find applying it within the context of team roles?
My list is just a lot of bodies. Host of Ascension, definitely skewing to kind of more the Horde style. People like Innis and Fluke are running a very similar list to this and having great success with it. I've been playing for a bit. Typically in singles, I have a bit more material on the ground. But this, I thought with teams, it could protect me a little bit, baby me a little bit. And I wouldn't go against like super rush armies that can kind of capitalize on me not having much material on the board turn one, especially if I lose the first turn roll. So yeah, it's just 4 bricks of Neos, all lead, Benedictuses, Primus, everything's got lethals, sustained when it drops, ignore cover, triple Ridge Runners to give the AP, and just and just drop around, shoot things, try and hit those 9-inch charges, wrap things. It's a ton of fun to play. It's a lot of models to move around. Everything regens, and I think I had a couple interesting wrinkles. I had a 10-man PSG unit, which is a bit odd, but I just felt like with the Primus redeploy, you can deny a lot of infills with that. And at 10 pure straight, it's terrifying for Eldar, and we figured we'd be running into a lot of Eldar, at least every round, certainly. So it was a ton of fun to play. And people were always afraid of me clocking, but I did my best not to.
And I got to add on to that not only did Stu not clock, but he was also our active coach, kind of running around table to table, getting the pulse.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like, being the active coach in a team setting while playing is a very hard job. Like, big kudos to you, Stu. And we're going to really talk about that a lot in part 2 of this episode. But, like, playing active coach role with GSC 150 models, how the hell did you do that?
I just had really, really nice opponents. So I would do my turn. It would get to their movement phase. We do their command phase, whatever. We get to their movement phase. I'd say, I trust you completely. There's a judge right there. There's a teammate right there. If you need to roll any dice for advances, I totally trust you. I'm going to just run around and do a couple minutes here, and then I would come back, and basically that'd be it.
And that trust is very genuine, and obviously you've got to have some level of like integrity when you're playing this game competitively. But it is so easy to like literally just adjust the board position ever so slightly when you're literally not at the table. It's like, this charge is now impossible instead of unlikely, stuff like that. This charge is like a 5 instead of a 7. Were you ever concerned about that or not really?
Honestly, no. I feel like sportsmanship obviously is so important in this game for so many levels. That could be a whole podcast in itself, honestly. But I feel like, especially in teams, the stakes is much higher. You're representing yourself, but you're representing all the people you came with. We were representing ourselves, Kaz and I, our teams, and the team that had helped bring us there. So it just was, I felt like sportsmanship was so important. Fair play was so important. I don't know. I just didn't even put it in my mind. I was like, this is going to be a great tournament. I'm just going to choose to trust everyone. And
and I'll add, like, kudos to the organizers. Hammertime,
totally.
They do a really good job of putting together a really good team and fostering a real sense of community. Like, there was no bad blood between any teams. There was no, as far as I saw or heard, there was no real contentious judge calls or anything of that nature. Like, everyone was having a great time. And a lot of these teams had folks that I've known from when I was a kid playing Warhammer Fantasy back in the day. It's a really tight-knit community, so there's a lot of trust.
Totally agree. It was awesome. And yeah, the TOs were super active. They were walking around engaging with us. You felt supported the whole time.
That's amazing. I really love that. The fact that the community has gotten to a place where you can play in a tournament for a podium spot, winning the event potentially, walk away, completely trust your opponent, come back, nothing has gone shady at all. Everyone's having a great time, and then you win that round anyway and go on to do really well in the tournament is truly spectacular. Like, big ups to the hobby for that one, the community in general. But I want to bring it back, and it's not all about how amazing the Warhammer community is, although it's true. With respect to the tournament, we also had a tiered list who you said was a first defender. What type of tiered list was that? Could you break it down like high level for me, Cass?
Sure. So this was Jordan's creation. It was a Vanguard tiered list. And, I'm not going to pretend to know the nuts and bolts of it, but I do know what it did really well, which was blunt a lot of different armies. When I looked at Jordan's matrix, I have the team matrix up right now, and I'm looking at it, and I see the odd, like, our scoring system was colored, so I see the odd orange, but for the most part, we're looking at greens and maybe a couple yellows. And what that did was it had a lot of different abilities. So he could jail an opponent that was very melee focused. Like we used him a lot in that type of environment. We also could leverage him against things that were a little bit squishier, like Eldar, or one of the things that we actually did discover was like, hey, this Vanguard list, because of the combination of speed, lone ops, and player skill, kudos to Jordan, was a really good counter to DACA orcs, more DACA orcs. And this is obviously, now we are recording this and it was nerfed, but when we played this tournament, more DACA was completely unnerved and was a scary thing that most of us hadn't had reps into. So it gave us answers to a lot of different questions the team comp otherwise couldn't handle. And if we gave Jordan table pick, sometimes it was unstoppable. So
Yeah, absolutely. I did not think of Vanguard Nids as an actual answer to DACA back when that was like a necessary thing. But holy crap, it really is. You got double 6-inch lone ops, you got reactive moves. It's like made of things that actually do well into orcs. That's really cool.
yeah.
And that's big kudos to Jordan for like actually, putting that on the table and delivering on that, because that's a terrifying matchup. And, as a first defender, there is pressure to like actually keep it together into the face of literally anything. So, big props there.
If you are listening to this, it probably means you play Warhammer 40k. And if you're playing Warhammer, you need a lot of dice. Baron of Dice is where we get our dice from. They produce amazing different kinds of dice. We just recently got all kinds of different faction dice shipped to us, which we use on our stream games. But not only do they look really cool, but they're highly customizable. You can get different symbols, corners that are square, corners that are round, different shapes and sizes, different sided dice. It's all the rage. And they're customizable in color and design as well. They are so cool looking. Not only that, but they feel great to roll in your hands. I've never held dice that roll and feel this good. Not only that, but they are scientifically perfectly balanced. There are tons of case studies on people rolling thousands of dice and recording all the results that they get. And sometimes you might get a die that rolls just a few too many ones. We've all had to throw it out before. These dice are not like that. They are perfectly balanced to a T, thousands of rolls, perfect distribution. If you want to take your Warhammer game seriously and make sure the dice are not screwing you over, get some Baron of dice.
And then you had a Chaos Knight player that you said was a little bit less experienced. How did you manage them? What was their list and kind of their position within the team?
So we kind of helped Pat make the list because he had played Chaos Knights and he had played different variations of it. What we ended up getting him on was a pretty standard War Dog list. We actually, I remember he had to go and switch up some of the loadouts on some of his models, but he was a good sport about it. He did it. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure, just Pat being kind of the least tenured in terms of teams competitive Warhammer, we wanted to make sure he was having a good time as well. So like there was some pairings where it was based off of the matchup. There was some pairings that we based off of, I think Pat's going to have a good time with this person. And I think, comp wise, we've got what we need score wise, as long as he can, hold it to a 5 or better. So that list itself, like it's a pretty standard Chaos Knights list. I actually think Stu might have played with a very similar list at a team tournament the weekend prior. But really for that, it was trying to avoid the horrendous matchups, which admittedly we didn't get right every single round. But for the most part, we kept him away from things that had an abundance of anti-tank or any list that we felt could kill multiple War Dogs in a turn. Because the guidance we kind of gave him was go score as many points as you can. In certain matchups, it's rush them down, but it's kind of hard to table all War Dog armies if you're not kitted out to be that role on a team. So we really leveraged the skew that many armored bodies kind of brings to the table.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like just slamming all those knights really can make it a lot more about the lists necessary than the player experience. And of course, having a player that can push it even further just makes it even that much more deadly. And then Stu, what was the last army that you brought to this event? And what was that role?
This would have been Warp's Sisters, but I love Brendan's list. I love Bickwarp's Holiday Martyrs list. It's has so many tricks. It's so hard for people to have had good competitive reps in. It's not really run that often. There's amazing like 3CP combo plays in that, for like Rapid Ingress to Heroic to Suffering and Sacrifice to completely nullify like big melee charges. It's really, really cool. It's tons of Arco Flagellants, which can be +1 to hit, +1 to wound, fighting on death. It's got Morven Ball, who's one of the best, still in my opinion, one of the best character units in the game that can just nuke anything from orbit potentially. And a ton of little canonesses running around that can get back up when they die. And it's a terrific list. It's because of the nature of how unique it is, I think it naturally blunts a lot of people. They just don't really know how to interact with it. It's hard for them to pair into, which is a super, super valuable tool to have as well. And just because Brandon's reps on it, how experienced he is as a Sisters player, I think he always has upside with it. So he performed really well with it. I don't think he ever really promised more than like a light green or a yellow on a lot of his matrices, but he did that with tons of upside. He was usually always bringing home scores higher than what he predicted.
Yeah, I know Brendan is absolutely a faction expert specialist on Hallowed Martyrs, and having a unique army like that, and you mentioned it earlier, is so powerful because most teams don't have a gauge for a list or a detachment they haven't really seen much. And even fewer teams will have a gauge for it against someone who is a faction expert on a detachment they don't see much. So it makes it super easy to underestimate what that list can do from the opponent's side. And then they pair wrong into you. Maybe they might even pair something that's bad into that Sisters list that they thought was good for them. And it's like a total flip and pairing because that can win a round right there. So I really love your team comp, actually. I think it's very unique, but also it's got a lot of great answers for challenges in the meta. Cass, did you at any point not like your team comp, or is there anything that stood out to you as this worked really well, or this wasn't that good and we would do it again and kind of leave this at home?
I would say that we probably could have brought something different than the Chaos Knights. And I say that because we found that this was it ended up being a really chunky meta. Like a lot of people brought armored skew lists. And there was other knights that seemed to be, what we found out, kind of tuned to kill all War Dog kind of armies. And there was, just as a result of this kind of being our local meta, I know that our sister team, the Knights of the Mid-Table, like their Space Marine list brought Lancers and was very busy killing armor that entire weekend. And I think you either need to bring more skewy armor lists if that's where you're going to lean, or fewer in a 5-man for it to be, a bit more balanced. I don't know what we would have brought instead, but I think that was the only list that felt like maybe we could have brought something different to the table. Because for some teams, it felt like we fell into a trap where it gave them an easy layup because they had a list in mind to deal with knights.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. It kind of fed into a lot of things that the opponents were already teched for naturally, so the skew didn't actually work out in your favor.
Exactly.
All right. I'm really excited to see what the actual round-by-round shakeout for this event kind of was. I just have one more question before we hop over there, and I'll ask it to each of you, but I'll start with Stu. Stu, if there was one piece of advice you can give an aspiring team or team member looking to do better or get involved with Warhammer teams and just really take that big jump and get good at it, what would that piece of advice be?
I mean, definitely get out there, do it, find a team. It could be your buddies, it could be a competitive team, do it, but commit yourself to the whole process. I think just going to a team's event with the mentality of a singles player, I'm just going to go play my games, that's it. I think you're missing out on a lot of what teams has to offer. I think getting involved in pairings, really taking the time to do your matrix and kind of all the nuance that goes with the process of teams is really fulfilling. It's so much to offer. You get to it involves yourself with your teammates on a much higher level, which is, I mean, frankly, if you're playing teams, is the whole reason why you're there. So for me, it's just committing yourself to the whole process, really enjoying it, understanding what army you're bringing, where it falls in the meta, so you can give accurate predictions to your team, and just enjoying it, man. Like I said, the sportsmanship is huge. It's super fun. Just like really commit yourself if you're going to do it, and it will. The dividends that will pay out will be if much greater than what you put into it.
Awesome. And Cass, what about you? What's your piece of advice for an aspiring Teams Warhammer player?
I mean, that was a really good summary of kind of like the front to back of it. But what I'll say is if you have not played Teams, and like one quick and easy thing that you can do to immediately start getting in a better mindset for Teams is you should start tracking your singles games with WTC scoring, which is differential scoring. Because one thing that WTC scoring really does is it shifts your mindset of a win-loss kind of binary to, okay, well, I lost by 2 points. That's actually a draw. And by doing that, you're going to not give up if you know that the game is going against you. You're going to get scrappy. You're going to start finding points. And that is such a valuable skill set to have in a team that, just building that muscle. Like you don't even have to go to a Teams event to get better at Teams. Just, if you use the Goonhammer app to track your score, just hit the WTC scoring button. It still shows you the real score too, if you want to see it. But what it does is it helps you calculate the differential. And it really puts things into perspective of, hey, like this would be my, like if you're playing a certain matchup, it gives you an idea of what you would rate it in the matrix. It gives you the muscle memory of not giving up just because something's going against you. And, when you have to push for points, it makes it very clear. Like you get that muscle memory, you get that sort of experience that's going to tell you, hey, like when my team coach comes up and says, hey, things are slipping, we need you to push. What does that mean? Well, if you play differential scoring and you've seen the impact of like a good last turn where you're scoring all your secondaries or where you're stopping your opponent from scoring, like just getting into those motions is going to make you such a better Teams player.
I think those are both really great pieces of advice. Stu, I really loved your approach to the team, holistically, just become part of it. And then Cass, I think that it extends beyond that as well. Even as a singles player, not prepping for a team tournament, you can get in the mindset of Teams, and the two are truly intertwined because it's both a game of Warhammer. And that's what we're here to talk about, folks. We're going to go over to part 2, continue this conversation, talk about their actual games from the team tournament, not just the nitty-gritty good stuff that we love to get into, but the kind of the stuff you don't really talk about, like in rounds, teams, pairings. How did things adjust mid-round? Some people start going down, some people start going up. Stu, I know you did a lot of active coaching in part 2. I'm super eager to hear about all that. And Cass, you were kind of in charge of the pairing, so I'm curious to see if things went so smoothly according to the theoretical plan. This is all what we're going to find out and more, folks. You can subscribe on patreon.com/AOW40K. Cass, Stu, thank you both so much for coming on the show. It's been such a pleasure talking to you both.
Thanks so much, Nick.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's been great being on.
Awesome. Folks, head over to part 2. Thank you so much for our patrons who support the show. This is literally how we keep the lights on out here. And we will see you in part 2 and then next week for yet another episode.
Like what you just listened to? Check out Art of War Down Under and Art of War Unbroken on the competitive 40K network. TheArtofWar40K.com.